In this next session, but I'm also an executive committee member with the State Bar of California, the solo and small firm law section. Many of you may not know, but the State Bar has essentially two tracks. The one track is the obligatory track where you have to pay your annual bar dues and become a member and get your little bar card, or else you have problems. But there's also a volunteer track, or a track where you can choose to become a section member of the State Bar. How many people are section members? Just one? Two? Three? Okay. So very few people know about this. The State Bar actually has sections where you can pay a very small fee. Our section fee is $85 a year, and most section fees are about that. And you can become a member of a group of attorneys in your same practice or same genre. For example, there's sections for litigators, workers' comp attorneys, family attorneys, criminal defense lawyers. There's also a section for solo attorneys. And the section is open to anybody. You can be from a big firm, you can be a law student, you don't even have to be a member of the State Bar to join the section. $85 a year. We have some flyers out on the table. We encourage you to join. It's the best $85 investment you'll ever make. The State Bar solo section provides programs. In fact, this is one of our programs. This was the idea of the State Bar. People came to us and said, we need to get together, we need to understand who we're alone out there, and so we created a new sort of an initiative for this year called the You Are Not Alone Initiative, and we created these events. This is the second one. Southwestern Law School did a couple, and Golden Gate's the second, and we have 3 other law schools that are following suit. We also have a book that we published, The Guide to Managing a Law Office. We're actually raffling this away today. So if you haven't put your information up front, we'll be raffling this one book away. If you want to purchase the book, it's available. You can on page 3 of the program. You can figure out how to purchase the book. And we have events. There's a solo and small firm meeting every year, an annual meeting. This year, it's in June in LA for 2 days. And there's lots of sessions like this. And all kinds of other benefits to joining. So please consider joining our section. Thanks.
Hey everybody, my name is Carla Jean Bakayan, and I'll be moderating the second panel here with Alex Lubarsky, Bill Metke, and Sam Wu. And this panel is called the Business Plan. So in the series of our panels, that first one was deciding, should I start a solo practice? And now we have decided we are going to start a solo practice. And these are, this panel is going to talk about setting up shop and the first steps after you made the big decision. So this question is for all of you to talk about. I just want to know, did you all start off with a business plan, and what factors did you consider, and what were the things that have to be included in a business plan to start your own firm? We can start with you, Sam.
Sure. Well, for me, I approached one of my friends from law school. I was a 2-year associate at a small law firm here in downtown, and he was a research attorney in San Mateo. So sometimes when I go down to San Mateo Courthouse, I would meet him over coffee, and we started to talk about, hey, it might be a good idea to work together in the future. We had a good rapport in law school. So when we started planning, I think when we started planning, the most important thing that we decided is just to be organized. We opened up a spreadsheet and just put all the information down that we think it was important. For example, which liability company that we should go for, where should we set up shop, how should we organize our files. So those are very important things that we thought that it should be included in our business plan, among other things, of course.
Hi, so I had a business plan only to the extent that that's as broadly and casually defined as you can imagine. I did not ever have any kind of a formal business plan. I had a to-do list that I still maintain and use to this day with current tasks. I really, you know, my personal experience was that I had practiced law for nearly 10 years. I was at a firm where it became apparent that I was I had outgrown the associate role that I had. But it was a very small firm. There wasn't room for me to grow into a role of more responsibility, and so we reached a sort of a mutual decision that I was going to move on. Didn't quite know what that was going to look like, and I talked about how I wanted, I had always wanted to start a solo practice, and so the people I worked for very generously allowed me to sort of taper off as a contract attorney, where I had been working at that point for a number of years, while I also gradually started my own practice. And so it started as a part-time practice. Really my overriding goal initially was to keep costs as low as possibly could. And we can probably talk more specifically about what that looks like as we go forward. I started off with a virtual office. We can talk about what that means. Thinking that it was going to be very temporary. I was going to very temporarily have a virtual office. I was going to very temporarily work from a cell phone, much like the previous panelists talked about. And now 3 years later, I'm really still working very much with that same model with very, very low overhead. Working the vast majority of my time from my home office and meeting with clients and conducting depositions in a virtual office downtown.
Hi, I'm sorry, could you all introduce yourselves so we have a little idea of your background
Sure.
before you
Want
talk?
to go back to Sam?
Sure.
Thank you.
My name is Sam Wu. I've been an attorney since late 2010. I started with a small law firm here in downtown. They mostly cater to the Asian Chinese community, and that's where my current practice mostly caters to the Cantonese-speaking community. I mostly do landlord tenant and labor law in San Francisco.
Thank you for raising that. So I'm Bill Metke. I've been practicing law since 2002. Virtually all of my practice in that time has been employment law, but I've represented both plaintiffs and defendants, depending on which firm I worked at a given time. My solo practice started 3 years ago. I only represent plaintiffs now. It's a strictly litigation practice. So everything that I do is on almost everything I do is on a contingency fee basis. And so there's a big, when I get paid a big number that then has to last me to the next time I get paid. And a long fallow period with no income at all. So that's something to manage.
My name is Alex Lubarsky. I started practicing law in '96. I went to Golden Gate twice for the JD and the LLM. I love it so much I'm back here today. I can't keep away. I started my law firm right out of law school. I actually speak Spanish, so I started doing immigration, and from there on out I sort of naturally branched out into criminal defense because there was a lot of crossover. People were being deported for crimes and they wanted me to help them in their criminal cases. And then when the economy sort of tanked both in late 90s and then again in 2007, I opened a bankruptcy practice to her. I added a bankruptcy practice to our firm. We now have 3 offices, one here in San Francisco, one in San Mateo, our main office, and then we have one in San Jose. And I sort of jump around the 3 offices and make sure everything is copacetic. What else? Oh, and I have a side business. I'm a technology consultant. I help law firms and corporations with choosing the right software and putting the right integration and implementations together for legal technology. Should I continue on the business plan? So when I started my practice, my undergrad degree, I went to Lewis and Clark College. It's this hippie school up in Portland, Oregon, and I was an English major and I did poetry for 4 years. And then I came to law school, and all I cared about was getting out and passing the bar. So when somebody approached me and said, "What's your business plan look like?" my answer was, "What's a business plan?" I had no clue. So I didn't have a business plan. What I did do, however, is I got this is, we're talking 20 years ago, but I got the version of this book 20 years ago, which was probably about 30 pages long. It's not quite as it is today. Best investment I ever made. It was the State Bar, How to Start Your Own Law Practice book, and it was just full of checklists. Things that you would forget to do. Have you looked into getting malpractice insurance? Have you got your business cards? Have you networked with folks? Have you compared your lease, your office lease versus what the market rates are? And I just went down the checklist methodically, and I took a highlighter and I made sure I hit every single point. And it was my Bible. For the first few months, it was my absolute Bible. And then from then, the practice sort of ran itself. But I did need that guidance. You found it in the form of this publication.
I'll absolutely second that. I actually bought that book 3 years ago, and it was invaluable. And I pulled it. I have it with me in my bag because I didn't know that Alex was going to be here. But I pulled it off my shelf this morning. I hadn't looked at it in a while, and just paged through it quickly and thought, oh, I really need to take another look at this book. It's been a while since I looked at it, and it's chock full of information, just practical information to help you check in and make sure that you're on track with the things you need to be thinking about and taking care of. So.
I'm not exactly sure if I used that book, but I did use a book of some sort to guide how we set things up in the beginning. It was really helpful just to know what other people, what experts in this field say about how to start a law firm.
What was it called?
I don't remember off the top of my head. It was from my partner that he brought up from his friend.
I did bring also this other book that people may have seen. This is the Foonberg book that a lot of people kind of make fun of it. It's a little bit hokey, but it's, you know, that's sort of his rhetorical stance is to be a cheerleader, and you know, his overriding message is, "You can do it," often in all caps throughout the book. but this also has a lot of very useful and practical information in it as well.
So after you guys made your business plan, there were some formalities that you had to follow, like getting a license and developing your business entity. Can you guys talk about that? Like, I know you have, you work at Wu and Young LLP. Like, why did you decide an LLP?
Well, the previous firm that I worked for was also an LLP, and we just figured it was probably a good transition just to stick with the LLP. We were two people. From our perspective, it didn't make sense to have law offices of Sam Wu and Joshua Young. That just was a too long a name, so we decided just to truncate it, get the LLP, and in our mind, it looked a little bit better, especially for a two-partner law firm. That's how we decided to stick with the LLP instead of just professional corporation or just law offices.
So mine is a solo practice. I do not have any kind of a corporate entity in existence at this point, so I'm just a sole proprietorship is what I am in terms of with the business entity. My tax accountant tells me that he'll let me know when I get to the point where it's more advantageous from a tax perspective to create an LLC, and then I'll talk about that with him at that time, but it was not something that I had to decide or even engage with at the outset and still haven't. So.
I'm also a sole proprietorship, but I'm also a DBA, which is a bit unusual. When I got out of law school, I don't know if anybody's here is old enough, but there was this famous lawyer on TV called the People's Lawyer. And I don't know how good he was or whatever happened to him, but I remember it stood out. Everybody remembered the People's Lawyer because it wasn't Smith & Jones, it was the People's Lawyer. So I liked that, and I said, I want to separate myself. I want to create a name for the firm that's not just 2 or 3 people's last names. So I created Community Legal Centers. The reason being, and I'll sort of truncate the long story short, but when I got out of law school, I was sort of broke and didn't know what to do, and a friend of mine from high school, I grew up here, was living in East San Jose, in the barrio. I don't know if any of you have been to East San Jose, but it's a heavily Latino neighborhood, and I didn't have a place to stay. He's like crashing in my garage. So I was crashing in his garage in East San Jose, and I walk outside and everything's in Spanish, and I happen to speak Spanish. I met some people on the street, and they're like, what are you doing, and why are you here? And I said, I'm starting a law practice, and the next thing I know, they said, you speak Spanish? Well, we have problems, and so a couple people came to me, and they had an asylum case, and I won it, and then next thing I know, people were knocking at the door at the garage, hey, there's a lawyer that lives in that garage. So, so I went to my friend and I said, can I convert your garage into a law office? I'll pay for it and I'll pay you. And he said yes, and we got the permits, and we turned the garage into a street side law office with the big signs, Community Legal Centers, still there today. And then we opened one in San Mateo, also retail space with a big sign, and it says Abogados, and that's how my practice grew. So we basically sort of grew organically that way, and I'm all about sort of this having a lot of visibility, and people come in, they say, they might not see the sign and walk in, but sometimes they do, but usually they said, gosh, I've been driving by your office for years and years on my way to work, and I've always seen it there, and now I've got a problem, and I figured I'd check it out. So that's how, I don't even remember the original call of the question here, but that's essentially how we started and how we got our name. Yeah, the name.
Great. So I know, Bill, you work out of your home, and Sam, you have 2 offices, and you have one office? 3 offices, okay, and 3 offices. So I know there's different views on having a home office and an outside office. Having a home office, it's more economically advantageous, but then having an outside office, you have it helps with isolation, and meeting with your clients and everything. Can you guys talk about the pros and cons of each and why you chose to have the office that you do now? And I know you have a home office, but you meet clients downtown. So a virtual office. So you can talk about that too. We'll start with you, Sam.
When I started with my partner, we originally only had one office down in San Jose. He was from San Jose, so he mostly go down there. He manned the San Jose office. For me, I would go down there twice a week just to show that I'm actually working too. But the other times I would go to a coffee shop or work from home as a pseudo home office. But about this time last year, one of my colleagues from my previous firm who also went solo, his floor had an open room, a vacant office. So he asked me, hey, do you want to open shop up here in San Francisco? And that was always been my plan, to have something in San Francisco as well in San Jose, just so we can diversify our practice. So when we got the place in San Francisco, that's where I've been since. I'm in San Francisco, my partner's in San Jose. I think the main advantage of having an office, an actual office, is just, like you said, isolation. I don't know how well you guys do work at home, but sometimes it can get distracting. I'm sure you guys know. So having the routine of actually waking up and leaving your home, going to work, and just have that isolation, I think it helps to have that professional mindset. I don't know how virtual offices work, but I wanted a set space for clients to come in every time, the same location. But I don't know how.
No, I'll talk about it, yeah. So I had actually never heard of a virtual office before I started out my practice. I'll explain briefly what it is if you don't know. It's a suite of business spaces. The one that I'm in currently is at 1 Sansom, so it's a very nice financial district location. I pay $100 a month. And for that, I have a mailing address. That's the address that's on my business cards. My mail goes there. I can tailor how often they forward the mail to me, or I can go in and pick it up anytime if I'm already downtown. When I actually need the space to meet with a client or for a deposition, I rent it by the hour. And the rates for a long time was $50 an hour, which was amazing. It's gone up somewhat from that, but you know, as I say, my overriding goal is to keep overhead low. And before I looked into the virtual office, I did look at some actual office spaces in what I thought was a budget that I could accommodate, and I would go in and look at some of these spaces, and I'd look around and say, wow, really, this is the office? Like, really, that's the carpet in this office? And what is that smell in the conference room? You know, it was like, I couldn't afford a space that really I was going to feel comfortable bringing clients into under any circumstance. Which initially was very discouraging until I discovered this whole virtual office. I mean, the space that I'm in for the virtual office, it's on the 35th floor, has this amazing sweeping view of the bay, and clients come in and they say, wow, you really must be a lawyer. But I go weeks sometimes when I'm just not in that space at all, because I'm off writing motions or answering discovery or doing all of the the writing, the desk tasks of my practice. And I do it in the home office space that I have set up. But Sam's point is very well taken. You have to create your own structure if you're going to work that way. You have to make yourself get up and get into the office. Whether it's a spare bedroom in your house or whatever it is, you've got to go to work. You've got to go to work and focus and get your work done. And at the end of the day, you've got to put it back down. It's really a struggle in both ways. It's hard to get focused and go to work in your sweatpants often. But it's hard at the end of the day. It's dinner time, but I'm thinking about things, and I go down and I check my email, or I have to resist the temptation to return that call that came in at 6:30 or whatever, because you've got to have some sort of division there between your life and your work, and so that's a real danger when you're working at home as well.
Well, I have 4 kids under 10, a hyperactive dog, a wife that likes to stay home and talk to me. So the home office is not an option for me. In fact, I tried yesterday. It was a Friday, I didn't have much to do. I didn't have any court hearings. And I said, I'm going to try to work from home today, which I haven't done in months. I had 1 call. My kid starts crying. The dog starts barking. And the client's like, what are you doing? And so anyway, I went to the office anyway. So it just doesn't work for me, although it may work for some people. As I said earlier, I'm sort of a believer in the retail space. Now, it's very unusual. Very few law firms do the retail space thing. You pay a premium for retail. You're going to spend a lot more than you are if you get an office somewhere, especially a lot more than your office at $100 a month. I'm at 40 times that or something. But I don't worry too much about not being visible. If you have an office somewhere on the 40th floor in a building, people don't know you exist unless you market yourself, unless you have ads in the magazines, or you have a website, or you're out there networking. I really love the fact that we have this sign and people pass it. We're on very busy streets and people see it and we're visible. And I actually at one point I looked at billboards, and billboards are fortunes. They're tens of thousands a month, and I basically have a billboard. So it's on my office, and I have almost the same amount of traffic you get in on a freeway or something like that. So for me, it makes sense. But again, it's an unusual choice. And I don't know if it's for everybody. It's for high volume practices. We have at any given time we have 20 to 30 people come in every day to our office. We're not a situation where we take on 1 or 2 clients a month. So it's for those kinds of practices.
So this is for any of you to answer. If you have any advice on what accounts to open, so after you find a space and you have a business plan, so you have to start managing your money somehow. So did you guys run into any problems, or do you have any general advice about any bank accounts or financial management?
Well, for us, when we look into managing our funds and clients' money, of course you want to have a trust account. And we basically just went to a local city bank and say, hey, we're lawyers, we need to open up a bank account. Any ideas what to do? Because we didn't really know what to do, besides the book that we use. So we opened up a business account, a business operating account, and also a trust account, and that was pretty much it. We ordered checks, and those 2 accounts are our main accounts that we would operate the business from, and to deposit client trust money. I don't think there's any real information there. Just talk to your local branch, or maybe the bank that you already bank at. I'm sure they have some sort of arrangement with setting up trust accounts.
Yeah, it's a good idea to educate yourself before you go into the bank as to what the bar's restrictions are, what the rules are with respect to your trust account. I had a friend who initially, the banker who we set it up with, didn't know that the interest from your IOLTA account needs to go to the state bar and doesn't go to you, that it can't be earning interest on your client trust funds. My friend knew that, but the banker didn't, and so he had to go and correct that. I didn't know initially that the trust account, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, because I should have known, that the trust account needs to have its own checks. And so I thought, oh, the trust account is like a savings account. When I need to disperse money, I'll just move it over to my own business checking account and cut a check from there. And that's a big no-no, which I thankfully figured out on my own before someone else called me on it. But the point is, there are rules to the trust account. I think they're spelled out pretty well in either of these books, really. And you should have they're not all that complicated, but they are hard, set and fast rules, and you should educate yourself on them before you go into the bank, because the personnel at the bank may not be there. So
You don't actually have to have checks on the trust account, but you can have the bank write a check from the trust account for you, like a certified check. One of the best things I did was I opened up a credit card account, so I could, not a credit card for me, I would take credit cards. And it had almost overnight doubled our revenue. It's incredible how many people out there, when you say, my fee is $2,500, they say, oh, I don't know, I'm going to have to talk about that. And then as they're leaving, they say, by the way, you don't take credit cards, do you? And I say, yes. Oh, well, why didn't you say so? Here you go. They don't even shop around. And not a lot of lawyers take credit cards, and it's really easy to take credit cards. You could sign up in hours. They have some cool technology now. I don't know if you guys have heard of Square, but there's mobile technology where you can sign up, plug it in your iPhone, and swipe a credit card in a cafe. Now, you do pay a small fee, a 3%, 5% fee to the credit card company, but a lot of people out there don't have cash to pay you, even a retainer, but they have the credit cards. And some of our clients are just purely we keep the credit card on file, we have a billing authorization form they've signed, we could charge them X amount per month, and we just charge it on their credit card. And again, it's, a lot of people, maybe it's a psychological thing, but they have no qualms about giving you that credit card. Sometimes I see them later on in my bankruptcy practice, though.
Oh, that was was a great segue into our next section, which will be talk about technology. I know, Bill, when we spoke on the phone earlier this week, you told me that most people who are thinking of starting their own practice will be a little reluctant to because they think of all the technology that's involved in an office. But you told me that you described yourself as a low-tech person. Can you tell us a little bit more about all the systems you have and?
So there's some basics you need. You need a computer. You're going to need a printer. You're going to need a scanner. You're going to want to probably spend a little more money than you think you should have to on those. The first all-in-one machine that I bought lasted me about 6 months before it died. Now I've got better hardware. You do not need a fax machine. You can have an e-fax account that basically is a virtual fax that runs in and out of your email. So as long as you've got a scanner, you can scan anything, and then you basically email things to a fax machine. That's the way it works, and it works in both directions. I'm kind of amazed that people still use faxes, but a lot of lawyers still use faxes. A lot of big law firms still use faxes. I think that's funny, but anyways. In terms of, we want to talk about software?
Can you speak to them?
Sure, we want to talk about software and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So there's a lot of software products out there for managing your practice. Some of them have free trial periods, which can be useful. You can explore and play around with, see the way that they work and so forth. Ultimately, I made a decision that I didn't need any of those. Because it's just me, I don't have to have sort of a common language for accounting or timekeeping or calendaring or any of that. I created some very simple spreadsheets on Excel that basically, the only operation that they do is to run a sum down to the bottom for the number of hours that I spend on a case, or expenses or accounting and that kind of thing. And I put things together in a very, very simple way that made sense to me. Obviously, if you're communicating with other people, that might not be the best solution, but there are some good products out there. I also built my own website, which I had never done before. I went to Wix.com, which is a website hosting company, and they have templates, lots and lots of templates. And I picked one, and I spent a long afternoon, and I built a website completely from scratch that is probably not the best, most professional website you've ever seen, but I think it's pretty good. And there again, I thought it was something that was going to be temporary and bridge me over till I got more established, and it continues to be the thing that I use. And people say, I called you because I really liked your website. And there again, I think my overriding message is, if I could figure out how to do that, then you can too. You're all very bright people, obviously. You can build a website if that's what you decide to do. Although that sort of raises another issue that I'll just mention, you can follow up if you want, that you have to make decisions at the outset which tasks you're going to do yourself and which ones you're going to delegate. So you may want to have someone else build your website. You may want to have someone else set up your accounting practices. You may want to have an accounting person to manage the money. You may want to have an assistant. You may want to have a secretary. You may want to have a paralegal. You may want to do any or all of those things yourself. It's just, those are sort of strategic decisions that you need to make at the outset for how you're going to spend your time and your limited resources and energy in terms of these various tasks that need to be completed. So some things you do yourself and some you don't.
I want to get your input, Alex, as a technology consultant on the essentials and how to find the right tech tools when you're first starting out.
First of all, you have to have the essentials. The essentials are the Microsoft Office suite, which is obviously Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You have to have that. I don't know anybody, lawyer, that can practice without having to use Microsoft Word at some point. You also have to have Adobe PDF Reader and Writer. The reader is free. You can all download it and look at things, but if you want to create a PDF, you need to usually pay for the writing software, which isn't much. But now with the court's e-filing systems, they almost all mandate that you submit your filings in PDF format. Everybody know what PDF is? Adobe PDF, yes, okay. So those are the basics. If you don't have, and you have to have a scanner, because sometimes, like exhibits, if you're filing something online and you have an exhibit, like somebody's bank statement or something, you have to scan that into PDF and attach it to your brief, which you've created in Word and saved into PDF. So you have two PDFs together forming one document, the initial document and the exhibit or the attachment. So you have to have that. Beyond that, in my opinion, the second most mission critical tools that we use every day and we can't live without is our case management tool. We use a system called ACT, ACT, which it's a database. I have about 9 or 10 people that work for me, so it manages all of our calendars, all of our clients, all of the notes, checklist of things that we need to do. It even manages some of the payments, etc. And it's highly customizable. So we have a section for all the judges we appear before. We have all the judges already input there. So if we're going to court, we just put a drop-down list. We check the judge we're going in front of. We have a section as to which office the client has signed up with. If they signed up in our San Jose office, again, it's all built into a checklist. There's also some other tools out there called case management tools. We use ACT, and there's one called Time Matters, and then there's another one that's really well popped called Amicus. Those are the top 3, I think: Amicus, Time Matters, and ACT. So look at those, and we can't live without it. If our system goes down, we don't know where we're supposed to be, we don't know who our clients are, we don't know what's going on if we don't have access to those tools. And then the next one is our billing system. We use Time Slips. Time Slips is a great tool for sole practitioners. It handles trust fund accounting. It calculates interest for you. It can create reports. You can see who's paying, who's not paying, etc. Every month it generates our bills, and it automatically creates envelopes and labels, and it'll send out email messages to clients who are late. It's phenomenal, and it's sort of the Time Slips. I think is the tool for this small firm out there. Beyond that, and then the next level of mission critical software is specific to your practice. And for example, our bankruptcy practice, we use a tool called Best Case Bankruptcy, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Before I brought this tool in, when I first started doing bankruptcy, I tried to do it by hand. I downloaded the forms and I manually filled them out, and I printed them out, and then I went on and I ordered credit reports for the clients manually, and I sent a check and I waited for it to come in, and I typed all the information into the form from the credit report. Then I'd print everything out, and I'd go to court and I'd file it with the clerk, and it literally took days and days and hours to do a case. With this tool, you input the client's information, the system goes online, does the credit report for you, sucks the credit report information into the forms, goes online, files the forms for you electronically, pays the filing fee from your bank account, and sets your court date for you, and emails you a receipt. It's one touch. It's unbelievable what this tool can do. It's completely transformed our practice. So we went from spending 10 or 12 hours to an hour. And it was far more accurate too. And we'd make mistakes online, or when we were doing it manually, we'd make mistakes. So the clerk would call and say, "You mistyped something. You have to come back and refile it." We'd have to print things out and drive to San Francisco and park our car. And if there's a problem now, you just go into the tool, you make the change, the tool creates an amendment, files it electronically. And every practice area has a tool like that. That's sort of the tool. And ask around. Ask your friends, colleagues, what do you use? I asked 2 or 3 bankruptcy attorney friends of mine, what do you use? And they all said, oh, everybody knows Best Case is the tool to use. We also use cloud-based solutions for immigration, for example. We have a tool called e-immigration Air, and so we can go online. All of our offices are connected. Well, you can be anywhere in the world. Just log on. You put the information about the client up online into a profile, and then you hit a button, and it creates all the forms you want from one database, rather than going into each form specifically. The other nice thing is it's got a feature where you can actually put the client's email address in, and whenever there's information about the client that you don't have that you need, it sends an email to the client, says, we need this information, what's your mother's birthday? The client responds to the email, and the system puts that information into the form for you. So you don't do the work. Your clients are actually doing your work for you, which is, so we don't. You can you can opt to actually have that enabled or disabled depending on the client. Some of our clients I don't trust to fill out their own forms, but we have a lot of very bright clients doing H-1B business visas, and they have engineering degrees. I trust them to fill out their mother's birthday accurately, and so you can sort of there's a lot of administrative features where you can enable and disable features. But these tools have completely transformed our practice, and they've made us far more profitable than we had we tried to do these things manually.
Can you repeat the name of that one?
That's called e-immigration Air, and there's another one called INS Zoom, which has actually got a bigger market share. We tried it and we didn't like it. It was sort of buggy, and we didn't get good tech support for them. But e-immigration Air has been phenomenal, and every week, I can be traveling anywhere in the world, and I can, if there's an emergency, I log on to any website, put in your your username and password. You're online, and you can pull up your cases, and it's incredible what it can do. It keeps checklists for you, etc. It's a great tool.
And I'll actually second the point about scanning and using Adobe. I have a complete electronic filing system that I didn't create. I actually adopted the logic of it from the last firm that I worked at. But I don't maintain paper files. I throw them in a pile as the case is going, and then at the end I box them up and I put them away. I have the paper files, but that's not my filing system. My filing system is all online. It follows a well-defined logic. Every piece of paper that comes in and out of my office gets scanned and goes into the electronic filing system. I back it up on a daily basis. And so I basically have my law firm's entire files with me on my laptop wherever I go.
I also do the same thing. I think it's just more convenient. Like Bill and Alex said, you can be anywhere in the world and you can always have access to your file if it's really important and you need those information. I also scan everything that comes in, everything that comes out. I don't back it up because I store it on the cloud, so it just makes things a lot easier to have access in everywhere.
One other thing I forgot to say, how many people use iPhones and iPads? Some really great resources there for dirt cheap. I've got one right here called California Law, all of California Law, the Penal Code, the Bugle Code, the Family Law Code, all right here. Whenever I'm in court, I just, I don't go to law libraries anymore, I don't go online, I just basically have it right here. Another one I have is called Objection, and Courtroom Objection. This one's great. It's got every state and federal, it's got federal and state, and you choose where you're at. If I'm in federal court, I put in federal, and if I'm in state court, and the judges and the opposing counsel think I'm a genius. Because they'll make some kind of they'll make some kind of statement in court, and I'll say, Your Honor, I object based on here character specific. I object, Your Honor, that's character specific. What do you mean? What's character specific? Well, Judge, aren't you aware of California rule of evidence? And they think I know this stuff, and it's just on my iPad right in front of me, and it cost me $3, and I use this thing constantly. And there's all kinds of really great tools. Just Google law, legal. I mean, not Google. Go into what is it? The App Store, and just do law or legal. And there's great apps for dollars and pennies. Some of them are free and are indispensable. Yes?
I just wanted to add to what you have said. I know it's often important to convert the Word documents to the PDF when you send out. There is a free way of doing that. If you do Google Docs, you could upload the Microsoft Word document and save it or convert it to the PDF format. It's not going to cost you anything.
Within Google Docs?
Yeah, it's one of the options there. I mean, you get more options like with editing on the PDF writer, but if you don't have the money or you don't want to spend the money and you just need the Word document converted to the PDF, you could always convert it and then download it, print it out, send it out.
That's good to know.
You can actually now save a Word document as a PDF within Word. You can just simply save as.
Great. I would like to open it up to any questions.
Early on in the conversation, you guys were bouncing around like best check-off books and Ethic 2 were mentioned. The first one, the one that you said that it's just basically used as a checklist. Are you talking about the Thunberg? The How to Start a Good Law Practice by Jay Thunberg?
I think that when Alex was talking about a checklist, he was talking about the State Bar's publication.
What was it called?
I can pass this around. We're auctioning this off, so nobody put it in their bag, please, but I'll pass it around.
The Thunberg is the one that I had as well, so.
Carol, did you have a question?
Yeah, this question is for Alex. I have never worked with the cloud, and quite frankly, I don't trust having anything out in the ether somewhere. But how do you ensure security of your client information and, of course, your work product by having some of this in the cloud?
Well, that's a very good question. And the short answer is there is no security. There's no guaranteed security. I shouldn't say there's no security, no guaranteed security, but there's probably far less security if you keep it local in your office. It's far easier for somebody to breach your PC in your office or on your laptop, or you leave it in court, or it gets broken, taken out of your car. The tools that are up online the reputable ones have, and I won't go into the technology, but they have certifications, SSL certifications, and they've been certified by, in some cases, the Department of Defense, and they've been tested. And basically, organizations such as the Department of Defense and other organizations actually they get teams of hackers to try to break into it. And if they can't, they get a certification. So it's hard to get into that data. It's pretty reliable. The bigger concern should not be can somebody get into your client's data, because it's very hard for them to do. And they can, but they can get into anything eventually. The bigger concern is the company going to go out of business? That's everybody's concern, because what happens to your data if all of a sudden the company shuts its doors? And that happens from time to time. So I always advise people, if you're going to go with a cloud-based solution, go with a Salesforce.com, or go with something that is not going to go out of business tomorrow. It's probably never going to go out of business in your lifetime. Because if you invest in some, if you're an early adopter, which is great to be an early adopter, but if you go into, Joe's website that was put up 3 days ago, and you met Joe at the cafe and say, hey, and he said, hey, I got to check out my new venture. Put all your client data up here, and you put all your eggs in that basket. And Joe goes out of business next week, and you log in and it's gone. Your data's gone. That's problematic. So you want to go with somebody who's got a reputation, is reputable, is going to be around. You also want to go with a web-based tool that has the ability to allow you to what's called briefcase, or download the data that you put up there locally, so you have sort of a backup.
Well, maybe you answered my question, but let me be sure. You talked about not putting all of your eggs in one basket. So if you use something like Salesforce, which I'll have to go on and Google, do you put some of that information, like in a different, like maybe a competitor's cloud service?
I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat it?
Okay, if you have your information in the cloud with, say, Salesforce was the one that you mentioned, just in case maybe Salesforce doesn't go out of business, but perhaps they crash, do you have, you mentioned briefcase, I'm not familiar with that. How is that a backup to the cloud?
Well, basically, briefcasing technology allows you to have an online tool like Salesforce. Salesforce isn't a great example because law firms don't really use Salesforce, but let's assume, just for purposes of illustration, that your data is in Salesforce. A briefcase tool allows you to download all the data from Salesforce in what's called a comma-separated value file. Essentially, it's a spreadsheet into your local computer. And then, if Salesforce were to go out of business, that download file that you've created, which taken all the data from the cloud down locally, is a kind of file that almost all other cloud tools can accept. You can go to another company that's not out of business and say, hey, Salesforce went out of business, here's my CSV file, I'm going to give it to you, and they'll upload it, and then you'll have your data in their tool. So it's a way to keep your data safe to have it physically present in a local environment.
Thank you.
I think it's also good practice, of course, backing up the files, but also, if you're leaving your office for a little bit, if you're sharing spaces in a virtual office, lock your computer, just have a password, and just to make sure that you practice safe computing. Have a antivirus scanner, just if you have to lock your doors, if you need to go out, then do that. No system is 100% secure, like what Alex said, but if you take reasonable steps, you should be able to have a decent security with your client's file. Question?
Quinn?
Yes, thanks. That was the best question in the freaking world, actually, because there isn't an answer right now. The government is trying to hire hackers who smoke weed that can't be hired to counteract Chinese hackers who are trying to take down the government and as well big companies, and it's the current issue. I just spoke to GE, which is developing a new department on cybersecurity, and inside information is that he is the man who has no information about how to counteract cyber hacking, but he is suddenly starting his own department, and he advises the same for lawyers. And the thing is, I haven't met a lawyer who can confidently say that they know cyber hacking law or even how exactly it works. And I'm trying to see if there's someone I could find as a mentor who would mentor me on that. If you guys can advise me on that, that would be great.
Well, I don't know any lawyers specializing in cyber hacking. I will tell you, though, that in my experience, law firms are very rarely hacked. The hackers out there, the cells in Russia, they're going after eBay and big businesses that have lots of personal information, credit card numbers, social security numbers. I don't think there's a lot of hackers that want my clients' immigration histories from Guatemala. I mean, it's not going to do them much good. I don't have an IP practice where I'm litigating the source code to Facebook, where maybe that kind of thing you wouldn't put it online, because there is a lot of espionage out there. There will be people who pay millions to try to get into that. So you have to look at your practice and look at the data you're trying to secure, and you have to really analyze the risk. I think that, in fact, if anybody wanted my client's data, I know I'm ethically obliged to keep it safe, but if I gave it to them, I don't know what they would possibly do with it. There's just not my bankrupt clients and my criminal defense clients that are facing DUIs. I mean, what are they going to do with this data? There's nothing in it for them. So I'm not extremely paranoid about that. But again, as I said, there are certain practices where you do have valuable data that people do have an interest in.
There was a question back here. Go ahead.
As you were starting out your firm, how did you define if your firm was becoming economically viable, and how long did it take you to get to that goal?
I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, that's the question that you would want to know as soon as possible when you start your own firm. For us, it's the solo practitioners that I spoke with, colleagues from previous law firm. They mentioned if you're starting on your own, you want to have a year or two of buffer, just in case you don't have enough clients in the beginning. Because when you're starting out, you're not going to have 20 clients every day, right? You're going to start very, very slow. So you do want to have that buffer zone. The time that we thought that we became viable, it's when we noticed that we're busy. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. In the beginning, you would go into your office, I would go into my office, I would sit there, look through some files, a case or two, make a few phone calls, but then there will be a long period of time where you don't really have much to do. But now, I'm always pretty much busy the whole day, every day. So I think that's the point where I would probably describe it as you have a decent practice and you start making money because you're busy.
So from my perspective, just the nature of my practice, it's plaintiff's litigation, it's on a contingency fee basis. My practice became viable when I settled my first case, which was many months into it. Really, I think that my experience is typical of other solo plaintiffs' practices that I've talked to. You're always looking at what you've got and how long that will last you and how many cases are going to resolve before that date hits. I'm having to make my peace with the prospect that I may never have, real 100% comfort and confidence that everything's going to be okay financially. There's always a hustle. There's always, making sure there's enough in the pipeline, worrying that there isn't enough in the pipeline, having that huge relief when a case settles, and now I've got a big bunch of money, but how long does it have to last, and is it going to be okay? You have to sort of make your peace with that uncertainty. You're not going to get a paycheck every day, particularly in that type of practice where you're going to have these big spikes and these long fallout periods. So.
And you will operate, I mean, in my experience, at least, and I think most experiences, you will operate at a loss for the first few months. I mean, you have all these startup costs, you have to buy software, and you have to lease office space and get business cards and what have you, getting malpractice insurance. We operated at a loss when we first started out, but my expenses were very meager. I mean, it was just me. As I said, I was working out of my friend's garage. I mean, I just kept costs down. My marketing was I went around handing out flyers to people. I went into the local laundromat and I said, can I leave some cards here? I volunteered at a church. There was a Latino church, and I said, I'll come in once a month and I'll hold an hour-long session and I'll answer for free in Spanish any immigration questions. And then so they took me up on that, and I went every month, and the word spread from that. So you just keep, it's guerrilla marketing tactics. You keep your costs down, and eventually the business comes, and then you scale up accordingly. For me, it's pretty easy to figure out where I'm at because I have essentially two bank accounts. I have our trust account and our law office expense account, and I see what comes in. I get statements from Wells Fargo, and every month it's like, here's what came in and here's what went out. And hopefully the number that comes in is bigger than the number that goes out. And hopefully that number, the bigger number, grows every month. And and that's how I figure it out. I'm not very, I don't have a great mathematical senses, so I just look at those numbers, and if I have to cut costs, I'll cut costs.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a few minutes left. I want to just go down the line and see if you guys have any pieces of advice about starting your own practice in general.
I think the main advice that I would probably give out is make sure you're ready. It's a big step. Some people, they don't want to have that first step of starting a law firm. They want just to have a constant paycheck every month. You're not going to get that in your solo practitioner practice. Bill talked about it. It's never guaranteed that you're going to get paid or you're going to have a steady stream income. So you need to be ready financially, mentally, and professionally. I did not jump into the small law firm right out of law school. I started with a small law firm just so I can gain some experience. And after 2 years or so, I thought I probably have enough experience because at the small law firm, I mainly did most of the work anyways. So why not jump on my own and just do the own work, but also get paid or keep all the money instead of giving out to partners. So I think being ready in all aspects is probably good advice that I would give out.
I think I would just really reiterate a message that was in the prior panel quite a lot, which is how key networking is, and just talking to as many people as possible. It's so many, it's important for so many reasons. It's important both in the substantive area of law that you're practicing to have people to sort of check in with, and what do you think about how I'm valuing this case, or I've got a procedural question here that I haven't encountered before, and to have people that you can ask about that. But also other people who are solo practitioners, either starting out or who have done it for a few years. And what you'll find is very quickly you're going to be on the advising end of that equation as well. As you're talking to people, as you're putting yourself out there, there's going to be people coming to you with questions as well, and you'll be pleasantly surprised that you'll have answers to give to people. It just, it feeds on itself. Referrals come to it, as was discussed in the previous panel as well. It's just, you need to get out there and talk to people.
Align your practice areas with your passions or your interests. The former panelist had somebody who said, "Hey, I practice music contracts." I guarantee you, I don't know who he is, but I guarantee you that he loves music. I love travel. I love different cultures. I love to eat at little ethnic restaurants. So my immigration practice, and even some of the other practices I started catering to immigrant communities, I'm passionate about it. And when clients come into me, I had a client come in from Kazakhstan yesterday. Wanted to apply for asylum, and he told me this story about the political parties in Kazakhstan. It was fascinating. I thought I should be paying him to listen to this. So do what you enjoy. For a while, I started doing workers' comp when I first started out because I heard it was lucrative. I hated it. It bored me to tears, and it was just very mechanical, and I just couldn't really connect on a personal level with the clients. All they were telling me about is how much pain they were with their elbow joint and when are they going to get their paycheck, and it just didn't do it for me. But so do an area of law that you're passionate about, and even if you're not making as much as you would in another area, you'll be so much happier.
Well, great. Thank you guys for coming. And the book that we're passing around will be raffled off at lunch. So if you haven't filled out a ticket at the registration table, please do so. And we're going to take a 5-minute break before panel 3. Thank you guys.